Kelsey Barnard Clark. Welcome to Biscuits
Hey.
Jam.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm a huge fan of this podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, it's great to have you on. Good to see you again. It's been way too long, actually.
I know.
So tell me where I'm reaching you right now.
I am actually at home, so Dothan, Alabama, in my house, which is great to be home for a little bit. I just was on a stint for a show for a month, so I was actually in New York, so it's nice to be home for a little while.
Yeah, I'm sure the travel gets to be a lot because I know you're on the road quite a bit, either filming or now you've got a book tour coming up. So it must be nice to be at home.
It is. I love traveling, and I mean that truly. I think especially more so as a mom with young kids, it's kind of amazing to be able to not escape your life, but certainly get these little pockets of just like a different atmosphere. But the hardest part to me is like planning the traveling. It's not the actual traveling part. It's like the Jenga pieces of where everyone's going to go when you're leaving.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on the book.
Thanks.
I just got a copy. It is sitting right here.
Yay! I'm so glad.
On my desk when I came in this morning, and I had seen the PDF, but there's something about a physical book that is, so nice. And
I'm with you for sure.
It looks great.
Thank you.
You must be really excited about it.
Yeah, I really am about this book. The first book, I like to say, it was almost getting your feet wet, So there were a lot of things looking back about the first book that I probably would have changed. It also was...
And that was Southern Grit, right?
Southern Grit was the first book. Second book is Southern Get-Togethers. And the first book, too, I was still writing it during COVID. It was so weird. I had... Even the photo shoot of the first book, I was 7 days postpartum with my second child. So it was just all very wild. So the second book felt just very much more like thoughtful. And I actually got to really spend more time doing it and not feel like it was in these weird times, whether it was pregnant, postpartum, COVID, So I'm really, really happy with the second book and the way it turned out. And I certainly had a great team, so it was good.
Well, it looks great, and I know the photographer Antonis.
You do, yeah,
quite well. He's shot for Southern Living for a long time, and we love Antonis, and he did a terrific job on it. I opened it up, and the first line in the book is about a quote from a song by the Highwomen called "Crowded Table," and it says, "I want a house with a crowded table." And that seems like a very fitting thing for you to put in here. I know how much you love to entertain. Has that always been something that you've been drawn to?
Oh my gosh, yes. I very much just growing up, I think I was always, I'm a chef, so people think food is my biggest obsession. And yes, it is. But really the thing about food that I was always so obsessed with was what it can do to people, right? It's just who ends up coming over and who will sit at a table and share a meal. It's like everything kind of goes away when you're sitting down and sharing a meal together. And I think especially now that I'm older, more than anything, I just look at food as this overall just way for people to have a common denominator and just kind of put everything aside that you might be disagreeing about. And that's what I've always dreamed of, having a house and a home where people, anyone, everyone, all of y'all can come and have a meal and we'll find something to talk about. And that was really the inspiration for the book, and truly is just my daily life of the most important thing to me.
I love that, there's kind of the fantasy of having get-togethers. And we do a little bit of that. We do some fantasy here at Southern Living sometimes, but this book to me seems very focused on making it real, making it approachable, breaking it down for people in a way that it's not intimidating, and really kind of encouraging people to just, don't worry about it. Just I think you said throw the damn party at one point. Just have people over.
And that's exactly it. I think that I'm a perfectionist to my core. And the one thing though that I have learned, and the biggest thing that this book is purposefully messy in places. And I've even said, like, you'll see my kids' toys in some of the shots. You'll see something is not as clean as it should be. And I didn't really want to fix that. I didn't want to go back and be like, oh, we need to edit these pictures. We need to take that stuff out. It was meant to be real. And I think that that's something that I just deeply am attracted to in people is authenticity. And sometimes the authenticity is like, this did not go well. And that's, you live, you learn. But I think at the end of the day, no one is going to be invited to your home and be sad about being there if they enjoyed themselves. You're not going to care about what even they ate. It's just all about kind of the shared experience, which is what the whole book is really meant to be, is making it easier on the person hosting so they can actually enjoy themselves. That's my entire goal, is just, to make the person reading this book feel like they have now a toolbox to do this and have fun doing it.
Well, you did a great job with it. And
thank you.
I want to get into the book more in a minute and get into maybe some specific recipes. But first, I want to hear a little bit about where you grew up. You're from Dothan originally. It's where you are now, back in your hometown. And this is sort of way down in the southeast corner of the state. I'm wondering if you can describe your hometown for me. I mean, what does it look like when you're just driving through town or just walking around?
Yeah, my family's actually all originally from Mobile. So just my parents, they moved here when I was very young. And so I don't have like grandparents or anything from here. It was just us. But I think that because of that, it kind of made me fall in love with this town in a different way than someone who would be like a fourth generation person where they had these told stories. So for me, growing up here was just kind of what you've heard about every small Southern town, right? In the best ways, some not all great all the time. But what's interesting about Dothan is it's not actually a small town, but it very much feels that way. And it's also interesting where like our town is surrounded by all these counties. So there's a lot of, just what I love about the South is like the farmers and just like salt of the earth people that work really hard, pray really hard, and do their best to be good people. And that's the kind of place that I was raised.
But you're close enough to the coast down there where it does have a little bit of that coastal feel, right? And that kind of finds its way into the food too.
Well, I think that's actually the coolest thing. And I think that that's the hidden gem of Dothan is that, door to door, I have a beach house in Panama City. A lot of people have houses, Orange Beach, Destin, but door to door from my house in Alabama and my house in Florida is an hour and a half. And 10 minutes down the street is the Florida state line. So that to me is kind of like this magical thing about living in a place like Dothan, Alabama, is we're not at the beach, so we don't have the tourist aspect, right? So you have this small town, a small town that's very simple and like quaint living, but then literally down the street is the most beautiful beaches, and it's Florida. And I think to me that's absolutely seeps into the core of our town in the sense of just like, we're a weekday place that most people on the weekends are at a lake or a pond or somewhere by bodies of water. And we all share that love. And that's sort of why we all are here.
Yeah. So did you grow up spending a lot of time in the outdoors? I mean, was that a big part of your...
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, we spent our entire summers, my parents had a beach house on Ono Island in Orange Beach. And so we spent all summer there, but it was also just, I don't remember spending any weekends in Dothan. It was always just like packing the car up and speeding down to get to the beach honestly, it was always like before the sun would set so we could set the crab traps. That was the goal at all times. And so it's just always been, for so many people who live here, a way of life is that you're just, I think, lovers of the water, and certainly seafood is definitely a huge part of this place.
Yeah, oysters, shrimp, crabs are just sort of omnipresent. Yeah.
Yep.
So, Kelsey, tell me a little bit about the kitchen that you grew up in. I mean, what was on the table? What did it look like, feel like, smell like?
Something that's actually very interesting in the way that I grew up is we absolutely I was not raised on the Southern food you would think of. We never fried food. In fact, the only time we ever fried anything was my great-grandmother Lillian, who we called Grandmother Lil. We would do a fish fry every year for her birthday. And so we would do fish fries a lot, but that was it. Other than that, it was My parents like to cook very healthy for the most part. And so it was a lot of like grilled meat. And the biggest thing though to me that is, I know you'll agree with me, I know a lot of people do, but when Northerners or people who aren't from the South think of the South and Southern food, they think of like fried chicken and fried food. But I think of vegetables. I think of this beautiful table full of the best vegetables you can find. And that's definitely, to me, what my home was about. There was always peas in the freezer. We would always have fresh corn, tomatoes, it was always vegetables everywhere all the time.
So I've heard you say that your mom was not like a huge cook. She wasn't.
Oh my gosh, no, still not. No.
But your grandmothers loved to cook. Did you pick up a lot from them?
Yes, I did. They didn't live in Dothan. They lived in Mobile. But for me, it was always just, we saw them pretty frequently though. But it was the stories about everyone that, like, if you said anything about, for example, my grandmother Lil or my other great-grandmother, everyone called her Sweetie. And then my grandmother June as well. Anytime you would talk about them or bring up their names, we didn't talk about them. We talked about the food, right? It was always like this casserole dish or this and that and that. And especially I think my favorite story on the planet about food, period, it's my favorite story, is my great-grandmother Lil. She, when my mom was going to college in Mobile, and this was the thing she would always do, but she would call my mom and say, hey, why don't you come over for lunch? And you know, what would that be now, right? Maybe like some sandwiches or something. But even my mom, who was 65 years old, when she was in college, she would go over to her house and it would be like a Thanksgiving spread. It would be dishes she had wanted to try. It was always, I think, interesting with my grandmother Lil specifically is she didn't have a lot of like things that, oh, this is her thing. Buttermilk ice cream was her thing more than anything. But other than that, she was such a curious cook. She was always wanting to learn. And so my mom would come over there and she was like, I mean, Kelsey, there would be 7 different things that she had been reading about in things like Southern Living and Food and Wine magazine. She'd have all these little coupons. Like I have her books. It's like these cutouts of magazines. But what was the coolest thing to me is she would usually have 3 different pies. Always. Always pie. Always 2 or 3 of them. And, you know, that might be something people are like, oh, whatever. But I'm like, y'all, that takes a long time. You know, can you imagine just putting that kind of love into food just for your one person to come over, just because you want to show them how much you love them that big? I think that that's something that I always think about.
Yeah, that's a couple of days of work probably.
Yes.
Just for that. Yeah. I'm imagining that in your family, there had to be some pretty big gatherings around the holidays. Would y'all go to Mobile or would you kind of hunker down in Dothan?
So my mom is one of 6 kids, and we typically, or a lot of the time, we would actually all meet at my parents' Ono Island beach house because there was this huge porch overlooking the water, a big kitchen, a big kind of open area. So we would meet there. And then really kind of all over. We hopped around a good bit. We didn't have like one tradition for Thanksgiving. That's my biggest memory more than anything is we would always travel for Thanksgiving. We would go to Mobile or Ono Island or really those 2 places and meet at someone's house. But everyone would go to one person's house. It wasn't like a hopping around thing. But it was a lot of people. It's a lot of people. And everyone had like a specific dish they had to bring. And it was funny. One thing that's really funny to me is my grandmother and great-grandmother were particular about the dishes you put it in more than they were sometimes like the recipe. It's like, no, you have to put it in that dance dish, and it has to be the red one. And we all have the red dance line now because it was like my great-grandmother's thing. It had to be the red dance dish with the macaroni or we can't eat it. You know, it's just like such a weird thing looking back on it, but it was just the way it was, you know? We never questioned it. We were just like, okay, we will do that.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Yes, she said so we will do.
So Kelsey, you started pretty early in terms of your business. I mean, you were working for a catering company at what, 15?
Yes.
I mean, were you cooking for these family gatherings too? Like, would you bring a dish or?
You know, I didn't really. I think it's because very typical of me. Like, I don't like following rules at all. So the fact that there were all these rules around it, I was like, I'm not messing with that. Y'all do that. I would definitely help. I loved helping. And it was actually, let me rephrase. There wasn't an option to not help. It was very much all hands on deck for things like Thanksgiving. Grating the cheese, that was the worst job ever. We all hated doing it, so we all had to do it. There were specific jobs that our moms and grandmothers were in charge that day, and we just did what we were told for the most part. Sometimes arguing, doing it, but we did it.
So talk to me about your catering gig. I mean, you get into the catering business, and you're working for a guy named Larry Paul. Yeah. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And I've heard you talk about him and the fact that he was a big influence on you. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, what are some things that you learned from him? As he was probably doing a lot of weddings on the coast and that sort of thing.
Yes. The interesting thing about Larry Williams, there was nothing about him that wasn't interesting. Let me just say that. Like, he was such a character. But he also was... I was 15 when I started working for him. And one of the biggest things as well is that he was openly gay, which I had never met anyone in my town, period, who I knew to be openly gay. And so he also introduced me to this whole different world and different culture that I'd never been experienced or never been educated about. So there were so many things. I like to say that he just he dipped my toe into this whole new world of culture. And just as soon as I started getting into the food world with him and just seeing where all that could take you. And I just realized, like, this is how you get out. This is how you learn. This is how you meet people, is you pick something, and in my sense, something with creative as well. And then you get to see the whole world. And that's what he absolutely showed me. He was also a musician. He taught music at our public school. That was his main job. Yeah, so he taught music. So everything about him was just... it was so much culture, and it was all about the creative arts, right? So whether it was food or art or music, he taught me a little bit of all of that while just prepping food in his kitchen. And the biggest thing that I learned, besides the events we did, was he would have visitors that would come see him. I'm talking about like 3 to 4 times a day. People would just come to see him. And I would just watch, like, why do these people all just come? We're working, and he would keep working. But they just came to like listen to him, just to listen, to be around his space, because that's what kind of person he was. And I think that I didn't even realize at the time how much I was studying just him. And like, what about him makes everyone want to be around him, right? Because that's what I want to be when I grow up, is someone that people want to come see, that they want to come to their house. Like, what is it? And at the end of the day, it was because he was inviting at all times to anyone with a plate of food. And that was it. It was very simple, but that is something that's an art as well in and of itself. And he was very much a magical person. So we would do weddings. He did florals and catering. And the one thing he would not mess with, he said the first day I ever met him, honey, I don't bake. You're going to have to bake because I'm not doing it. And I was like, well, I do bake. And I actually worked for a cake decorator, so this is perfect. And that's sort of how we became like a yin and yang type of situation. I would do all the baking. And then actually when I was 16, he left me in charge. He literally left. He was like, you're in charge of packing the reefer van. And I was like, what? I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't have the list. Like, what if we forget something? It was a 500 person wedding in Panama City at someone's house. It was a huge, even now, as someone who owns a catering company, I'm like, what was he thinking? But I look back on that moment of like, he saw something that I had no idea I had in myself. And it definitely like sparked this light in me of like, oh, I can actually be a leader. I can do this. I just haven't yet. So there was a lot of times like that with him when he definitely saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time.
I mean, 500 person wedding. I mean, the stress of that, I have to imagine that, as much as you're learning from him, you're also in a pretty high stress environment. I mean, long hours, exhausting work, probably difficult conditions, particularly when you're doing remote weddings and setting up everything. What about the challenge of that? I mean, what's an example of like a really challenging moment?
It all is challenging, honestly. I mean, that's what That's literally my company now is we do travel weddings. That's 99% of them are on 30A. So the challenge of it all is that none of them are the same. You are working with the elements, right? So it's, first of all, it's always hot. It's always 1,000 degrees down here. And there's always humidity. There's always something that doesn't work. There's always something that messes up. You're never breathing, honestly. You're never taking a breath like we did it. Even when you're done, there's still like things that can go wrong with the breakdown of it all. I think that that's truly the best thing that ever happened to me was starting out that way. Because the biggest thing I've learned more than anything, in my nickname in my business is the MacGyver. Everybody calls me that because I'm like, there's nothing we can't figure out. And it's because I literally have seen it all at this point. It's not because I know it all. It's because I've experienced all these things before. And the biggest thing that I've realized at this point is most things are fixable. They might not be perfect when you fix it, but they're typically fixable. You just have to like calm down, take a breath, do the best you can. And sometimes the best you can is not what you want, but you just got to make it happen, which is really what this book is all about, is like imperfect situations is really the reality of it all. There never will be one dinner party that you're like, that was just perfect. Everything went well. It never works out that way. Not when you are dealing with life.
Throw it anyway, invite people over and, have a good time and make the best of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've heard so much about your time in New York, and, you go up there and you're working for Cafe Boulud and you're working for this Michelin-starred restaurant, Dovetail. And, hearing you talk about working for Larry and working in the catering business, by the time you got there, I think of that being a pretty high stress environment, but to some degree, you must have been kind of ready for that. Like you had been through some stuff, you'd been through some challenging situations, and yeah.
I've never really thought about it that way, but you're probably right. That's probably how I survived. Because this is something that I was like terrified to admit whenever Cafe Boulud was my first kitchen job. It's the first time I'd ever worked in a kitchen. That is not a good idea. World, whoever is listening, do not do that. Your first like kitchen experience really does not need to be Michelin, okay? Because you need to know what you're doing before you get into these places. So I just had to like literally just like bullshit my way through the whole thing, just literally lie through my teeth half the time. Like, yeah, of course. And then
I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. But then Gavin Kaysen, who was the chef at the time, who has become he's a mentor to anyone he meets, to be honest, because that's who he is. But he said this to me years later, and it changed my whole life and the way that I operate now, is finally after I think I was there for 2 weeks, or maybe it was not even, it was probably like a week. And I finally just looked at him and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you please teach me? And he was like, if you ask the questions and you're willing to learn, I'll teach you whatever you want. And that's really was like this moment for me where it's like, we don't have to know. Even now, as someone who owns businesses, I'm like, no, I will always ask the question. I'm not going to be scared to say I don't know how to do it, because I'm here to learn, and I'm always here to learn. And I think that was one of those moments where I had been just trying so hard to make everyone believe I knew what I was doing, that I was honestly like hindering myself because I wasn't asking the questions. I was too busy trying to convince them I knew what I was doing. And I think that's actually the best advice I could give anyone is like, the more you're willing to learn, the more people will teach you and show you.
When you came back to Dothan from New York, did you see your old hometown in a new light? Did you have a new kind of appreciation for it, having been away for a while?
New York was the best thing that ever happened to me because of the time there and what it taught me. But more so than that, I did not think I would miss home and the South. And I always say that like, I did not fall in love with the South or appreciate it one single bit until I left it, And it was the things that I was missing that it was shocking to me. It was things like, I miss sitting with my friends at their houses. I miss houses so much. That was one of the biggest things I remember thinking to myself is, God, I miss yards. I miss the water. I miss grass. I miss farm stands. And it was just constant. I miss dirt roads. I miss driving my car next to cornfields. Like it was all these things that I was like, I don't even remember having memories and thinking about that when they were happening ever. Cause it just is life. Right. And then I would come down when I would come back and visit and my mom would be like, she's lost her freaking mind, surely. Cause it was like, all I wanted to do was just like drive around and listen to cows and stop at farm stands and just be back in everything that you miss. And also the silence of the South is such a beautiful thing. I say that all the time of like, it's so quiet here. I mean, I'm sitting at my house right now and it's so quiet. Everywhere you go is quiet. And the only sounds you hear are usually like nature. You might hear some, of course, you'll hear a car honk, but it's quiet here. And it's because everything sort of slows down back in the South a little bit. And that's something that I literally came home for that. I was like, I've got to take a break from New York. New York is so loud and so fast, which I'm also loud and fast. So I fit right in, don't get me wrong. But when I came back, I had a new look on it as well of like, there's some things we could do here. There's some things we could do better. And for me specifically, it was the downtown of our town. It just was gone. And that's something that became very important to me very quickly.
Well, you mentioned taking a break. I mean, you're going 100 miles an hour all the time. It seems like you've got the cookbook coming out. You're doing TV stuff all the time. You're doing events. You're running a restaurant. You're running a catering company. You're doing these big weddings. I mean, what do you do to just take a break when you've got like a few minutes or when you've got an hour to just relax?
I mean, you're going to think I'm lying. And everyone I say this to, I'm like, I hate that this is, when I say it, it sounds like I'm just like this person but this is literally true. I do flower arrangements and I do like plants. That's literally, I did that 10 times this week. The more things are out of control, the more I'm like, I've got to get my hands dirty. And I don't mean that as like a joke. It's so therapeutic to me. And I learned very quickly too, when I've been gone for a long time, the first thing I need to do is like get my hands in my house, like in my garden, in my plants, like literally reroute myself back home. Because if not, I feel like I'm just spinning. I don't know what to do. I don't know where I am. Whose kids are these in this house? This is so loud. What is going on? It's literally just, when I've been gone a while, it really is a weird transition. And the one thing that I've learned, it's like the fastest way to get me right back feeling like I belong in my home is to belong in the home and to get in there with my house and to redo my pots, do flowers. And one thing I started doing as well is like taking my friends' things. So when I got home last week, I've been gone a month and I spent every day, my friends were all like, you're coming over again? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to bring you dinner. And it's things like that of just rerouting myself in my life and doing things for people makes me feel more attached to where I am.
I should have known that your idea of taking a break would somehow be
doing something.
I know. Yes.
No.
I love that. I want to ask you about downtown Dothan. You mentioned that, needing some new energy and you opened a restaurant that the first one I think did not work. And now you've got another one that has really become a draw for the city. And it's a destination for people. But talk to me about that process and getting that set up, even as you're doing all these other things.
I use the failure story with the restaurant so much because I think that so many people, and I say that because I even am speaking to my younger self when I say these things, you look at people who you find to be so successful and you're like, yeah, but you knew it would work out, right? You knew it would work out. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, just because you know that you're working hard and you know you've done the right things to get where you're going, you don't ever know it's just going to click. There's no way to know. And I think that whole situation with me with the restaurants was a prime example. Is like, yeah, I'd done the work. Yeah, I'd done the things I was supposed to do, but there is no secret to success. There is no secret recipe. You just have to keep trying, right? And so for me, I can't really pinpoint it any more than to say, like, what I knew wasn't right about the first restaurant more than anything was that my heart wasn't in the space. I'm a big believer in like, you have to be quite literally all in with the space. And I'm a lover of old things. I'm a lover of revitalizing things and fixing them. And so when I found out that the building downtown, the building I'm in now, was potentially becoming available, I was like, why in the world would I open a second restaurant while this one is literally not working and failing? That's a great idea, guys. Let me just tell you, that's literally where we were. It's like we have one that's failing and not making money. So we should just do it again, right? We should just do the same thing in a different place and see what happens. That's the definition of crazy, actually. But there was just something about it that I thought, this is it. And I think that I would say to any entrepreneur, if you have that feeling, you got to go with it. You just have to, your body really will tell you some things with that. And that was for me. I just had this gut feeling that it wasn't the restaurant that was the failure. It wasn't the idea. It wasn't the food. It was the fact that like, there's no heart in this place. And if I bring the heart, then the people will want to stay there and they'll want to hang out. And that's exactly what this building has. People, now it's a problem because we need people to leave and they sit for too long. But, you know, it's just so funny. It's like, look what happened. But yeah, it really, there's a magic in the downtown. We still have a lot of work to do. But now that one building I got, we have 4 buildings. And so it just kind of became this thing we kept adding on. And it's cool. I mean, it's a very cool spot. There's so much history there. And you can feel that someone's worked really hard for it when you're in there. And I think that that's important.
Well, I've not been, but I can't wait to get down there one of these days and
Would
go.
love to have
Yes,
you.
I'm dying to go. I've seen lots of pictures and it just looks like a beautiful space and looks like a great menu and a very lively place, which I think is probably what you were after.
Yes, it is. And, you know, and I think as well, one thing that we really made important was that there is space for everyone in this place. You can bring your kids and have a nice meal. You can be on a date night. You can be whatever you're doing. You can have a business meeting. And that was the biggest goal as well, is very much the way I want my home to be, is anyone can come in here with any budget and find something for themselves. And that's, I think, really what the magic secret potion was with it, is that everyone feels like they belong.
Kelsey, I want to talk a little bit more about the book. And the first thing I've got to ask you has to do with football season, which by the time this episode comes out, we're going to be in the heart of the season. And I'm wondering what like that looks like for you on a big game weekend. I mean, what are you serving? You know, if you think about the book, is there a dish in there that is kind of a go-to for you when it comes to tailgating?
Yes. In fact, I'm literally writing my 3rd book right now, and it's all about like tailgating, outdoor cooking. So it's literally on my brain as well. But there's nothing better than game day, period. And I don't give a crap about the game. I'm being really clear, y'all. I don't care about the game at all.
Now, I'm assuming you're an Alabama fan, but
I went to Auburn though. Yes. It's
you're an Auburn
confusing.
fan.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm a mess is what I am. I went to Auburn. My whole family is huge Alabama fans, and my brother played tennis at Alabama. So we all 100% went all in Alabama. The reality is I love SEC football, and that's what I say. I love the South and I love SEC. So I'll root for, and also my aunt and uncle who I'm like very close with, my mom's sister, they were the athletic director and golf coach at LSU. So we literally have got we were grown up LSU fans more than anything. So it's just very messy in our house.
It's complicated. Yeah.
It's very complicated. So I always say that I'm just a fan of the SEC, and that is the truth. It really is the truth. Okay. So game day for us, you know, there's always a shift in game day, right? Because at game day where we are in the South, in the deep South Alabama, it's hot until like playoffs most of the time. And then sometimes you'll get like a little bursts of fall that'll sneak up in October, maybe. So it really depends on the weather. It's very weather driven for me, but it's funny. The beginning of football season is always like the beach for us. So we will do things like low country boils by the pool, low country boils on the beach, fish fries. That's to me the beginning of football season. Then when we're sneaking into October, It's chili, oysters, and hot dogs. That's a chapter in my book, is like the oyster and chili dog spread, which still makes me giggle because my editors were like, what are you talking about? I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Yeah. And I had to explain like the whole conundrum of the chili dog and the oyster. And they were like, that actually makes so much sense. Like oysters don't fill you up, so you get a chili dog. I'm like, right. And that's probably my absolute favorite spread, period. But just, I love oysters so much. I love anything that requires people to use their hands is magic for me, especially in 2024. That's why I do things like the low country boils and the roasts and having oysters, is because if you're getting your hands dirty, guess what you're not doing, y'all? You're not playing on your phone. You're not doing anything like that, which is so rare in the days that we're in for us to literally disconnect on accident. And that's what happens when you do things like that. So a lot of the spreads I do, especially during football season, are things that are going to require you use your hands and build things and eat with your hands.
Well, I love that idea of like a low country boil keeping you busy. And, you're picking up the corn and you're maybe cracking a crab claw and it's super messy. And yeah, you can't do anything else but just engage in the food and the people around the table.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, too, I always think to myself as well, the kids are always there for us. Now it's so funny with my group. We've got like 30 kids at my house on any given Saturday. That's just what our group is now. And it's even watching the kids when we're eating and doing, it's like, I can't help you right now, I'm doing this. Watching what they do. Then all of a sudden they're not going to look at their devices. They always end up in my chicken coop every single time. Every time someone will open the coop and then they're all in there. And then all of a sudden they're walking up with chicken. So it's just, that's weird. I'm aware, y'all. It just is what it is. But I do think that like, that's what I've always said is like, that's the magic and the power of food sometimes, is look what it can do just by accident.
I got to ask you about your banana pudding.
Okay.
There's a recipe in there for shortbread crumble banana pudding.
Yes.
Which caught my attention both because of the name and the photograph. I mean, it looks so damn good.
So good.
Tell me about that one. I have not seen a version quite like that before, and it looks so good.
Banana pudding is probably my favorite dessert, period, hard stop. I absolutely freaking love it. When it's bad, it's good. And when it's good, it's fantastic, right? And to me, it's like from a chef's side, it's perfect. It's creamy, crunchy, salty, sweet, velvety. It's got everything. And it's one of those things about Southern dishes that I say all the time is like a lot of these cooks that came up with these things didn't even know. They knew more than we did at the time. But now as a chef, the way we pick apart food, they were already doing that, right? So yeah, the banana pudding, the shortbread crumble, it's not real shortbread. It's just this, which is, as someone who was a pastry chef, my favorite thing to do after learning how to be a pastry chef and a Michelin pastry chef at that, was like, how can we make all this a little bit easier but still taste fantastic, right? And that's what this crumble is. It is flour, sugar, butter, salt, period. And you bake it and then you crumble it and it stays so crunchy. And that's what I love to do with food as someone who grew up on these things, but now as a chef, is how can I make it the best bite that it ever was, but it stay that way? How do we do that, right? And that's the crumble part of this, is Nilla wafers get so soft, right? And so then sometimes
they get soggy. Yeah, that's just kind of what happens. Yeah.
And then you're missing the crunch, and the crunch is what makes the texture of the banana pudding. So the thing about the crumble is it would take but it won't even last long enough for it to go bad, because you're going to eat it faster than the crumble would ever get soft. So that's where this banana pudding comes in.
Ooh, that sounds good. I mean, it looks good, and it also looks pretty easy to make. So that's a plus. That's a plus too. So Kelsey, we've got an event coming up with you in Birmingham that's called Food Plus Fire, and it's on September 21st, and it's all about kind of live fire cooking and tailgate culture, and we're doing a cooking competition between you and David Bancroft, an Auburn guy, great chef from Auburn. It's called the Alabama White Sauce Challenge. I'm just wondering if you know what you're going to make yet.
I do, and I know what he's cooking. because at first, actually, when I was asking what he was going to cook, this is not our first rodeo cooking against each other. Let me just tell y'all. Nor is it our first rodeo. We've actually competed together before, but no one really knows about it. But so I know how he works with food because we've talked about it a lot, and I've seen the way his brain works with dishes. So I was like, what would be really cool is if we did the exact same thing, but like we just say, this is what we're going to cook, and then let's see what happens. I think he's scared because he won't do it with me, but we'll see. Maybe I can talk him into it. But yeah, I am doing actually, what am I doing? Oh, I'm doing ribs.
Oh, okay. That'll be good.
It's, are you familiar with char siu, like pork char siu, Chinese style? Okay, so it's kind of like Chinese red rib, so it's got Chinese elements to it. But the very long story short of it is ribs is my favorite game day food besides some of the others I've made. I love ribs, period. But game day food-wise, like that is so good. Like it has its own device to hold. You can walk around with it. It's protein. It's delicious. It's smoky. And I always say like one thing I want to taste on anything that's like game day related, I need to taste smoke or char or grill, right? So that's what this dish is all about. And then when you pair it with something like white barbecue sauce, it cools it down, which is like the hot and cold element of things. So I think it'll be good. I mean, of course I will be David.
I can't wait. And it's getting close to lunchtime right now, so it's making me very hungry. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you at that event.
Me too.
And I just have one more question for you.
Okay.
Kelsey, what does it mean to you to be Southern?
To me, it means to be Southern is to maintain the best traditions that everyone before us has instilled in us and take the ones that need to be tweaked and honor that as well. And I think more than anything, it's community, it's kindness. It is this slow, steady pace that you can't get anywhere else. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of heart. There's so much love and heart and just passion for a certain way of life down here that is definitely admirable.
Well, as someone who left for a while and has come back and really made a home in Dothan, I love hearing that from you, and I know you love being there. I can tell it comes through in everything you do.
I do.
Well, Kelsey Barnard Clark, thanks so much for being on Biscuits and Jam.
Thank you for having me. This was a dream. I appreciate it.
Great to see you.
You too.